The Galactic Military Convention assembled on the orbital station Meridian 7, a massive structure that floated above the neutral world of Vexara Prime. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the grand amphitheater, their varied forms creating a tapestry of colors, shapes, and sizes. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of languages into comprehensible speech. Commander Vexthor of the Krillian Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembly, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. And now, Vexthor announced, his voice booming through the chamber, we welcome the newest applicants to the Galactic Defense Coalition. From the primitive world in Sector 7G, the humans of Earth. A wave of chittering, clicking, and various forms of laughter rippled through the crowd. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 5 years ago, making them infants by galactic standards. Captain Jake Morrison led the Earth delegation down the long walkway toward the podium. Behind him walked Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes, Chief Engineer Paul Davis, and the delegation's most unusual member, Sergeant Ken Hayashi. While the other three wore standard Earth military dress uniforms, Ken wore something entirely different, the traditional hakama and gi of a samurai, with his family's katana secured at his side. Look at them, sneered General Throck of the Mandorian legions, his rocky exterior crackling with amusement. They bring swords to a plasma fight. How quaint. I heard their homeworld is still recovering from global conflicts among their own kind, added Ambassador Zira, her crystalline form refracting the light in prismatic patterns. They fight each other with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Jake kept his expression neutral as he reached the podium, though he could feel the heat rising in his chest. Lisa's jaw clenched beside him, and Paul's hands balled into fists. Only Ken remained perfectly calm, his face serene, his posture impeccable. Captain Morrison, Vexthor began, his tone dripping with condescension. Perhaps you can explain why Earth believes it belongs among the warriors of the galaxy? Your species has barely left your own solar system. Your weapons technology is centuries behind our most basic armaments, and you bring a man dressed for a costume party to a military convention. The chamber erupted in harsh laughter once more. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Ken took a single step forward. It was a small movement, barely perceptible, yet somehow every eye in the massive amphitheater shifted to him. The laughter began to fade, replaced by curious silence. Ken said nothing. He simply stood there, his right hand resting naturally near his katana, his breathing slow and steady, his eyes dark and calm swept across the assembly with the patience of stone. Well, Vexthor challenged, does the primitive warrior have something to say? Ken's silence deepened. It was not the silence of someone who had nothing to say, but rather the silence of someone who had no need to speak. He stood like a tree rooted in earth, immovable and ancient. An uncomfortable shifting began among the delegates. The Krillian warriors, bred for combat, felt something primal stirring in their genetic memory. The Mandorians, whose people had conquered 17 systems through sheer military might, found themselves unable to look away from this small, quiet human. Commander Vexthor's confident sneer faltered. He had faced down enemy fleets, stared into the void of space, and challenged the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy. Yet this human's silence unnerved him in a way that no threat ever had. I believe, Jake finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension, that we requested a demonstration rather than a debate. We're not here to convince you with words, Commander. We're here to show you what humanity brings to the table. Vexthor recovered his composure, grateful for the break in Ken's unsettling quiet. Very well. The arena awaits. Choose your champions, humans. Our best will face yours in honorable combat. If you can prove yourselves worthy, we will consider your application. We accept, Jake said simply. As the Earth delegation turned to leave, Ken was the last to move. He executed a precise bow to the assembly, a gesture of respect that somehow felt more powerful than any words could have been. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the metallic floor. Behind them, the assembly sat in stunned quiet for several seconds before the chatter slowly resumed. But the mocking tone had diminished, replaced by something else entirely: uncertainty. The combat arena on Meridian 7 was a marvel of engineering, a spherical space half a mile in diameter, where artificial gravity could be adjusted to match any world's conditions. Holographic projections could simulate any terrain, any weather, any environmental challenge. Thousands of spectators filled the observation decks, eager to watch the upstart humans be put in their place. Jake stood in the preparation room with his team, reviewing the tactical displays. The Galactic Defense Coalition had selected 3 champions to face Earth's representatives in individual combat trials. Each fighter was a legendary warrior from their respective species. First up is War Chief Drex of the Mandorian Legions. Paul read from the datapad, his voice tight with concern. 7 feet tall, silicon-based life form, virtually impervious to conventional weapons. Undefeated in 347 combat trials. Second is Blade Master Kyrnix from the Valorian clans, Lisa continued. 6-armed, enhanced reflexes 50 times faster than human baseline, expert in 17 weapon systems. And third, Jake finished, his eyes moving to Ken, Champion Vextor, brother to Commander Vexthor, Krillian Special Forces cybernetically enhanced, trained since birth in combat arts from across the galaxy. Ken sat in the corner of the room, his katana laid across his lap, his eyes closed. He had been meditating for the past hour, his breathing so slow and deep that he seemed barely alive. Yet there was an energy around him, a presence that filled the room like the calm before a storm. Ken, Jake said softly, approaching his friend, you'll be facing Vextor in the final trial. He's enhanced, armed with the latest plasma weapons, and has tactical implants that let him predict his opponent's moves. Are you sure about this? Ken's eyes opened slowly. A warrior does not concern himself with the strength of his opponent. Jake. He concerns himself with the weakness of his own spirit. That's very zen, Paul muttered. But the guy literally has computer-assisted combat prediction. All technology, Ken replied calmly, is a tool. Tools can be broken. Tools can be taken away. What remains when the tools are gone? He stood, lifting his katana and securing it at his side. His movements were fluid, economical, precise. The spirit remains. The discipline remains. The void remains. Lisa exchanged a worried glance with Jake, but neither of them spoke their concerns aloud. Ken had insisted on representing Earth in one of the trials, and they had reluctantly agreed. He was, after all, a decorated veteran of Earth security forces, and his family had practiced the warrior arts for over 30 generations. The announcement chimed through the room. Earth delegation report to the arena floor. First trial begins in 10 minutes. They walked together through the corridor, emerging into the massive spherical space. The artificial sun above cast perfect daylight across the simulated terrain, a rocky highland that resembled the Mandorian homeworld. The crowd roared with anticipation. War Chief Drex already stood at the far end of the arena, his massive form radiating confidence. His body was composed of interlocking silicon plates, each one harder than diamond. His forearms each held a different weapon, a plasma hammer, an energy shield, a gravitational disruptor, and a molecular blade. Jake's champion stepped forward, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Earth's heavyweight combat specialist and undefeated champion in zero-gravity wrestling. Marcus was huge by human standards, 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle, but he looked like a child next to Drex. You may begin, the arbiter announced. What followed was less a fight than a statement. Drex charged forward with the force of a freight train, his weapons blazing. Marcus dodged, weaved, and countered with precision strikes to the gaps in Drex's armor. But every blow that would have felled a human warrior merely scratched the Mandorian's silicon hide. The fight lasted 8 brutal minutes. Marcus fought with courage and skill, but in the end, Drex's sheer physical superiority proved overwhelming. The Mandorian war chief stood victorious, his primary weapon raised high as the crowd erupted in celebration. Marcus was helped from the arena floor, battered but alive. He gave Jake a frustrated shake of his head. Sorry, Captain. That guy is literally made of rock. You fought well, Jake assured him, but his heart was heavy. They had lost the first trial. The second trial began immediately. Blade Master Kyrnix entered the arena, his 6 arms moving in a hypnotic pattern as he wielded 6 different blades simultaneously. His exoskeleton gleamed with an opalescent sheen, and his multifaceted eyes could track dozens of movements at once. Earth's second champion, Major Christine Palmer, was a master of tactical combat and Earth's finest swordswoman. She wielded twin plasma-edge combat blades, weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Begin. The fight was a blur of motion. Kyrnix moved with impossible speed, his 6 blades creating a web of death that seemed impossible to penetrate. Christine was magnificent. Her movements a dance of precision and power, but she was simply outmatched. 4 arms became 6, became 8 as Kyrnix revealed hidden blade arms in his exoskeleton. Within 5 minutes, Christine was disarmed and defeated, though she had managed to score several hits that had the crowd gasping in surprise. No one had ever made Blademaster Kyrnix bleed before. As medical teams helped Christine from the arena, the crowd's mood had shifted slightly. The humans were losing, but they were losing with honor. They fought with courage against impossible odds. Final trial, the arbiter announced. Champion Vextor of the Krillian Empire versus Earth's representative. Ken walked onto the arena floor. He wore no armor. He carried no modern weapons. His only protection was his traditional hakama, his only weapon the katana at his side. Against him stood Vextor, a nightmare of military engineering. The Krillian warrior was encased in advanced combat armor that could withstand direct hits from starship weapons. His cybernetic enhancements gave him strength, speed, and reflexes beyond natural limits. His arsenal included plasma rifles, molecular disruptors, and nano-edge combat blades. The crowd fell silent. Then the laughter began again, louder than before. This was beyond mismatch. This was suicide. Ken walked to the center of the arena and stopped. He did not draw his weapon. He simply stood there, his breathing calm, his expression peaceful. His eyes met Vextor's across the distance. And then Ken smiled. It was not a smile of bravado or false confidence. It was the smile of a man who had found perfect clarity, perfect peace, perfect readiness. It was the smile of someone who had already won, though the fight had not yet begun. Vextor felt a chill run down his spine despite his thermal regulation systems. His tactical computers began running probability scenarios, searching for threats but found nothing. The human was unarmed, unarmored, and utterly vulnerable. So why did every combat instinct Vextor possessed scream at him to be careful? "Begin!" the arbiter called. Neither warrior moved. The arena fell into absolute silence. Thousands of spectators held their breath as 2 warriors faced each other across the simulated highland terrain. Vextor stood in a combat stance, his plasma rifle aimed at Ken's chest, his tactical systems running constant threat assessments. Ken stood perfectly still, his hand resting near his katana, his breathing calm and measured. Seconds ticked by. "What is he doing?" Lisa whispered from the observation deck where the Earth delegation watched. "Why isn't he moving?" Jake leaned forward, his hands gripping the railing. He had known Ken for 5 years, had served alongside him in 3 different campaigns, but he had never seen his friend quite like this. There was something different about Ken now, something that transcended the man Jake knew. It was as if the sergeant had shed his identity and become something older, something timeless. "He's waiting," Paul said softly, his eyes wide. But for what? In the arena, Vextor's confidence began to waver. His tactical computer kept insisting the human was vulnerable, defenseless, an easy target. Yet his combat instincts, honed through decades of warfare, screamed warnings. He had fought thousands of battles, faced every type of warrior the galaxy had to offer, but he had never encountered anything like this stillness. "Fire your weapon, Krillian," Ken said quietly, his voice carrying across the arena despite its softness. "Or draw your blade. But choose quickly. Hesitation is death." Vextor's finger tightened on the trigger. The plasma rifle hummed with charged energy, ready to unleash a bolt that could punch through starship hulls. At this range, the human would be vaporized, yet something held him back. Some primal instinct that predated his cybernetic enhancements, older than his tactical training, deeper than his programming. "Do you know what a samurai truly is?" Ken asked, still motionless. "Your databases can tell you the definition, but definitions are shadows. A samurai is not a warrior who lives by the sword. A samurai is a warrior who dies by the sword. Every day. Every moment. Every breath." Ken's hand shifted almost imperceptibly toward his katana. "I have already died 1,000 times today. I will die 1,000 times more before this breath ends. What can you do to a man who has already died?" Vextor fired. The plasma bolt screamed across the arena, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. To the spectators, it was a flash of blue-white energy. Ken was no longer where he had been standing. He had moved the instant before Vextor pulled the trigger, his body flowing like water around the shot. The katana sang free of its sheath with a sound like crystal bells, and suddenly Ken was inside Vextor's range, too close for the rifle to track. Vextor dropped the rifle and drew his molecular edge combat blade, his cybernetic reflexes kicking in. He thrust forward with computer-guided precision, the blade moving faster than human eyes could follow. The katana intercepted it with a sound like thunder. For the first time in his enhanced life, Vextor felt outmatched. The human moved not with speed but with perfect timing. Every strike Vextor launched was deflected, redirected, or avoided entirely. Ken flowed around attacks like smoke, his blade always exactly where it needed to be. "Your computer tells you where I will be," Ken said, as they exchanged blows in a blur of motion. "But I am not where I will be. I'm not where I was. I am only where I am, and where I am cannot be calculated." Vextor activated his secondary weapon systems. Micro-missiles launched from his shoulder mounts, seeking the human with heat and motion sensors. Ken's blade moved in a complex pattern, deflecting 3 missiles back toward their source while dodging the others entirely. The explosions tore through the arena floor, throwing up clouds of dust and debris. When the dust cleared, Ken stood untouched. Vextor charged forward, his armor's strength enhancers giving him the power to crush steel. He threw a punch that could shatter stone. Ken stepped inside the blow, his katana moving in a precise arc. The blade found the microscopic gap between armor plates at Vextor's elbow joint. The Krillian's arm went limp, severed circuits sparking. "Your armor makes you strong," Ken said, his voice still perfectly calm despite the intensity of combat. "But it also makes you slow. Your enhancements give you speed, but they also make you predictable. You have surrounded yourself with tools, Vextor. Have you forgotten what lies beneath them?" Vextor roared in frustration and activated his emergency power reserves. His armor glowed with energy as he pushed his systems beyond their safe limits. He became a whirlwind of strikes, his remaining arm moving so fast that it left afterimages in the air. Ken closed his eyes. The crowd gasped. The human had closed his eyes in the middle of combat against one of the galaxy's most enhanced warriors. Yet somehow, impossibly, Ken's blade continued to intercept every strike. He moved as if he could see the future, each motion flowing into the next with perfect economy. His katana hummed through the air, singing a song of steel and spirit. "When you rely on your eyes, you see only surfaces," Ken said, his voice a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the arena. "When you rely on your computers, you know only data. But when you empty yourself, when you become nothing, you can sense everything. The shift in air pressure, the sound of servos engaging, the intention behind the attack before the attack begins." Ken's eyes opened. In that instant he moved, not with superhuman speed but with absolute precision. His katana traced a perfect circle through the air, and suddenly Vextor's armor began to fall away in pieces. Shoulder plate, chest guard, leg armor. Each piece had been cut at its weakest point, severed with surgical accuracy. Within seconds, Vextor stood in only his basic combat suit, his armor scattered around him in neat pieces. Not a single cut had touched his flesh. The Krillian warrior stared at Ken in shock. His tactical computers had registered 17 strikes, each one precisely calculated to disable his armor without causing him harm. It was impossible. No warrior in the galaxy possessed such perfect control. "Yield," Ken said softly, his katana held in a guard position. Vextor's pride warred with his tactical assessment. Every system told him he was defeated. Without his armor, without his weapons, against this human who moved like water and struck like lightning, he had no chance of victory. Slowly, Vextor lowered his blade. "I yield." The arena exploded with sound, but it was not the mocking laughter from before. It was something else entirely. Awe, respect, fear. Ken bowed deeply to his opponent, then turned and walked calmly from the arena floor. As he passed the Earth delegation's position, he caught Jake's eye and gave the smallest of nods. "Holy hell," Paul breathed. "Did that just happen?" Lisa was speechless, her mouth hanging open. Jake found himself grinning despite the tension. They had lost 2 trials, but the one they had won would be remembered for generations. In the VIP section, Commander Vexthor watched his brother helped from the arena floor, uninjured but thoroughly defeated. The commander's expression was unreadable, but his thoughts were churning. Perhaps Earth was not as primitive as they had assumed. The Galactic Military Convention reconvened 3 hours after the arena trials concluded. The atmosphere in the grand amphitheater had shifted dramatically. Where before there had been condescension and mockery, now there was uncertainty and heated debate. Commander Vexthor called the assembly to order, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. The Earth delegation has completed their combat trials with mixed results. 1 victory, 2 defeats. However, the quality of their performance, particularly in the final trial, has sparked considerable discussion among the member species. Discussion? General Throck's voice boomed across the chamber, his rocky form radiating anger. There should be no discussion. The humans failed 2/3 of their trials. By our own rules, they should be denied membership. The rules state that applicants must demonstrate combat capability sufficient to contribute to the coalition's defense, interjected Ambassador Zira, her crystalline form shimmering. I would argue that Sergeant Hayashi's performance demonstrated extraordinary capability. 1 warrior does not make a military force, Throck countered. The Mandorians have millions of warriors of equal strength to War Chief Drex. The Valorians have thousands of blade masters like Karnix. What does Earth have? 1 samurai with an antique sword? Jake stood in the delegation area, listening to the debate rage around him. Beside him, Lisa and Paul looked frustrated, eager to speak but knowing they had not yet been given the floor. Ken stood slightly apart from them, his eyes distant, his expression thoughtful. If I may address the council, Jake finally said, his voice cutting through the argument. Vexthor gestured for silence. Captain Morrison has the floor. Jake stepped forward, aware of thousands of eyes upon him. General Throck asks what Earth has beyond 1 samurai. That's a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer. Earth doesn't have silicon-based warriors who can shrug off weapons fire. We don't have 6-armed blade masters or cybernetically enhanced soldiers. What we have is something different. He paused, gathering his thoughts. In our history, we've faced extinction dozens of times. Disease, natural disasters, wars that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. We don't have the natural advantages that many of your species possess. We're soft, relatively weak, and we die easily. But we're still here. Do you know why? The chamber was silent. Adaptation, Jake continued. When we couldn't overpower our enemies, we outsmarted them. When we couldn't outsmart them, we outlasted them. When we couldn't win alone, we learned to fight together. Every disadvantage we've ever faced has forced us to become more creative, more resilient, more determined. Pretty words, Throck rumbled. But words don't win wars. You're right, Jake agreed. Which is why I'd like to propose a different kind of demonstration. Not individual combat, but tactical simulation. Let Earth's military strategists face your best war planners in a strategic exercise. Judge us not on the strength of our warriors, but on the strength of our minds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was unprecedented. Combat trials were standard, but strategic simulations were usually reserved for established members. An interesting proposal, Vexthor said slowly. But what stakes would you propose? Surely you don't expect us to grant full membership based on a theoretical exercise? Provisional membership, Jake replied. Give us 1 year to prove our worth in actual operations. If we fail, we withdraw our application and don't return for a generation. If we succeed, we gain full membership with voting rights in the Coalition Council. And if we refuse your proposal? Ambassador Zira asked, though her tone suggested she was intrigued. Jake smiled. Then we go home, continue building our own fleet, and the galaxy moves forward without us. But I think you're all smart enough to recognize an opportunity when you see one. You've watched one of our warriors defeat one of your champions using nothing but discipline and a blade. Imagine what we could contribute with our full military and scientific capabilities at your disposal. The assembly erupted in debate. Species argued among themselves, factions formed and dissolved. The humans stood quietly, waiting for the chaos to resolve itself. Finally, after nearly an hour of heated discussion, Vexthor called for order. The Coalition Council will vote. All in favor of granting Earth provisional membership, pending successful completion of the strategic simulation, indicate your support. Lights began to appear across the chamber as species cast their votes. Jake held his breath, watching the tally climb on the massive holographic display. It was close. Painfully close. But finally, the count stabilized. 51% in favor. By majority decision, Vexthor announced, Earth is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition. The strategic simulation will take place tomorrow. Captain Morrison, I hope you understand what you've wagered. If your strategists fail, humanity will be locked out of galactic affairs for an entire generation. We understand, Jake replied, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. We won't fail. As the assembly adjourned, the Earth delegation made their way back to their quarters. Lisa waited until they were in private before exploding. Are you insane? We don't have our top strategists here. It's just us and a handful of support staff. We're going up against military minds that have been planning interstellar warfare for thousands of years. I know, Jake said calmly. Then why did you propose this? Paul demanded. Jake turned to Ken, who had been silent throughout the entire proceedings. Ken, want to tell them? The samurai finally spoke, his voice quiet but certain, because Captain Morrison understands a fundamental truth. The way of the warrior is not about strength or speed or technology. It is about understanding yourself, understanding your enemy, and finding the place where victory already exists. That's very philosophical, Lisa said. But it doesn't help us win a tactical simulation against alien war masters, doesn't it? Ken asked. In the arena today, I faced an enemy who was stronger, faster, and better equipped than I was. By every logical measure, I should have lost, but I won because I understood something my opponent did not. I understood that all his advantages were also weaknesses. His armor made him strong but slow. His computers made him fast but predictable. His enhancements made him powerful but dependent. Ken turned to face the entire group. Tomorrow, Earth will face the same situation. We will be outnumbered, outgunned, and outexperienced. Every logical measure says we should lose. But we will not lose because we will see what they cannot see. We will find the weakness in their strength, the vulnerability in their confidence. We will win not because we are better warriors, but because we are better at being human. Jake nodded. Ken's right. These aliens have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They're brilliant at it, don't get me wrong, but they're also predictable. They have patterns, traditions, established doctrines. We don't. We're chaos to their order. We're innovation to their tradition. That's our advantage. Paul looked skeptical but thoughtful. Lisa's expression softened slightly. Okay, she said. I'm still terrified, but okay. What's the plan? First, Jake replied, we need to understand exactly what we're facing. Paul, access our databanks. I want profiles on every major coalition military campaign from the last century. Lisa, work with Ken to analyze the arena trials. I want to know everything about how these species fight, think, and plan. Look for patterns, blind spots, anything we can exploit. And you? Lisa asked. Jake's expression hardened with determination. I'm going to do what humans do best. I'm going to prepare for a fight where all the rules are against us, because that's the only kind of fight we've ever known. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Ken remained behind with Jake. The two men stood in silence for a moment, looking out the viewport at the stars beyond. Do you really believe we can win? Jake asked quietly. Ken was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled. The outcome is already determined, Jake. It was determined the moment you made your proposal. Tomorrow we will show the galaxy that Earth does not ask for acceptance. We demonstrate why they need us. The Strategic Operations Center on Meridian 7 was designed to simulate large-scale military operations across multiple star systems. It was a massive spherical room lined with holographic projectors capable of creating perfect real-time simulations of fleet movements, planetary defenses, and tactical scenarios. The Coalition used it to train commanders and test new strategic doctrines. Today it would be used to judge humanity's worthiness. Jake stood at Earth's command console, his small team arrayed around him. Lisa managed communications and logistics. Paul handled technical systems and intelligence analysis. Ken stood slightly apart, his role undefined but his presence somehow essential. Against them stood the Coalition's finest military minds. General Throck commanded the Mandorian strategic team, Blademaster Kiernix led the Valorian tactical specialists, and Commander Vexthor himself directed the overall Coalition force. The scenario was brutal in its simplicity. Earth's forces would defend a strategically vital system against a coalition invasion force 3 times their size. The humans would have 1 week of simulated time to prepare defenses. Then the battle would commence. Victory conditions were equally simple. Hold the system for 30 days of simulated time or force the coalition to retreat. This is absurd, General Throck rumbled to his colleagues on the coalition side. We outnumber them 3 to 1. We have superior technology, superior firepower, and centuries of tactical experience. This will be over in days. Do not underestimate them, Vexthor cautioned, his eyes on Ken's silent form across the room. The sergeant taught me yesterday that appearances can be deceiving. Your brother lost to a primitive with a sword, Throck countered. That was individual combat where luck and surprise can matter. This is strategic warfare. There is no luck at this scale, no surprise that can overcome such numerical superiority. The Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. Preparation phase begins now. Earth delegation. You have 7 simulated days to establish your defenses. Coalition forces, you have the same time to plan your assault. Begin. Holographic star systems blossomed into existence around both command centers. Jake immediately began issuing orders, his team working with practiced efficiency. To the watching audience in the observation galleries above, the human strategy seemed competent but unremarkable. They fortified the primary planet, established orbital defense platforms, positioned their outnumbered fleet in a standard defensive formation. They're using classic defensive doctrine, Blade Master Kernix observed. Concentrate forces, establish defensive depth, prepare for a war of attrition. As I expected, Throck agreed. They're playing it safe. Smart but insufficient against our numbers. The 7 days of preparation passed quickly. Both sides finalized their strategies, positioned their forces, and awaited the battle to begin. Preparation phase complete, the Arbiter announced. Combat phase beginning. Coalition forces may begin their assault. General Throck wasted no time. His Mandorian heavy cruisers advanced in a broad front, their weapons primed. Valorian fast attack squadrons moved to flank the human defensive positions. Krillian strike groups positioned themselves to cut off retreat routes. It was a textbook multi-axis assault, overwhelming and inescapable. The coalition fleet crashed into Earth's outer defenses like a tidal wave against a sandcastle, and found nothing there. What? Throck's confusion was evident as his force's sensors showed the supposedly fortified positions completely empty. The orbital platforms were there, but they were unmanned. The defensive fleet that had been positioned in orbit was gone. Where are they? Vexthor demanded, scanning the holographic display frantically. Where did the human fleet go? Jake smiled from his command console. Now. Suddenly, coalition sensors lit up with contacts throughout the star system. The human fleet had scattered into dozens of small groups, each one hiding in asteroid fields, nebula clouds, behind moons and within planetary rings. They hadn't prepared a central defense at all. They had set a trap. The scattered human forces struck simultaneously from every direction. Their ships were smaller and less powerful than the coalition vessels, but they attacked with surgical precision, targeting sensor arrays, disabling communication relays, hitting supply ships and support craft. They're not trying to win through force, Lisa explained to Paul as they watched the battle unfold. They're disrupting our ability to coordinate. Look, the coalition fleet is 3 times our size, but they can't effectively use that advantage if they can't communicate. Within minutes, the coalition's carefully orchestrated assault dissolved into chaos. Mandorian heavy cruisers turned to engage threats that had already disappeared. Valorian fast attack squadrons found themselves pursuing phantoms while their supply lines were cut. Krillian strike groups received contradictory orders from multiple command ships, each one believing they were in charge after communication networks were severed. Regroup, Throck ordered, but his commands reached only a fraction of his force. Pull back to Rally Point Delta and re-establish formation. But the human forces didn't allow regrouping. They struck at every attempt to consolidate, harassing, disrupting, and withdrawing before superior numbers could be brought to bear. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale. Days passed in the simulation. The coalition forces, despite their overwhelming advantage in numbers and firepower, found themselves unable to effectively control the system. Every time they seized a position, human forces would strike elsewhere, forcing them to respond and abandon their gains. This is the way of the warrior, Ken said quietly, speaking for the first time since the battle began. Strength against strength leads only to destruction. Water against rock leads to patience. They expect us to meet force with force. Instead, we become the water. We flow around their strength, we find the cracks in their stone, and slowly, inevitably, we wear them down. By day 15 of the simulated battle, the coalition forces were exhausted. Their supply lines were in tatters. Their command structure was fractured. Their fleet was scattered across the system trying to chase down elusive human raiders. Vexthor stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How are they doing this? We outnumber them 3-1. You outnumbered them 3-1. Jake's voice came across the communication channel that linked the two command centers. But you're not fighting 3 times as many ships anymore. You're fighting 300 times as many targets. We divided your attention, disrupted your coordination, and turned your numerical advantage into a tactical liability. Every ship you send to chase one of our groups is a ship that's not defending your supply lines, not protecting your command vessels, not working as part of your overall strategy. This is not warfare, Throck protested. This is cowardice. Stand and fight like true warriors. No, Ken's voice joined the conversation. This is not cowardice. This is wisdom. A samurai who fights a battle he cannot win is not brave. He is a fool. A warrior who adapts to overcome impossible odds is not a coward. He is a master of his art. The simulation continued. By day 25, the coalition forces were in full retreat, not because they had been destroyed, but because maintaining their invasion had become logistically impossible. Their supply situation was critical. Their casualties were mounting not from major battles but from constant harassment, and their ability to coordinate across the vast system had been reduced to nearly zero. Simulation concluded, the Arbiter announced. Earth forces have successfully held the system for the required 30 days. Coalition forces have withdrawn. Victor, Earth delegation. The Strategic Operations Center fell silent. No one could quite believe what they had just witnessed. Then slowly the applause began. It started with a single Valorian in the observation gallery, then spread throughout the chamber. Warriors from dozens of species, each one a master of their martial traditions, stood and acknowledged what they had seen. Not a victory of strength over weakness, a victory of adaptation over tradition. General Throck approached the human command center, his rocky features set in an expression that might have been respect. I understand now, he rumbled. We judged you by our standards and found you wanting. But you do not fight by our standards. You fight by your own, and in doing so you have shown us something we had forgotten. What's that? Jake asked. That warriors who know only victory have forgotten how to learn. You come from a world that has tested you in every way possible. You have learned not just to fight, but to survive. That may be more valuable than any weapon. Commander Vexthor joined them, his expression thoughtful. The Coalition Council will convene immediately to vote on Earth's full membership. But I can tell you now, Captain Morrison, that you have earned more than provisional status today. You have earned respect. As the crowd began to disperse, Ken approached Jake and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. You understand now, the samurai said. The lesson I tried to teach in the arena. What lesson is that? Jake asked. That victory exists not in the future but in the present moment. You won this battle not by planning to win, but by understanding the only way victory was possible, and then doing it. No hesitation, no doubt, just action born from perfect clarity. Jake nodded slowly. The way of the warrior. The way of the human, Ken corrected.